What's going on, everybody? Monday, February 16th, 2026. My name is Kevin Smith. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Loud Majority Live. We got a jam-packed show for you guys on this President's Day. The Munich Security Council happened, and, well, there was some fireworks there. Marco Rubio gives one of the best speeches I've heard in quite some time from an American diplomat. Also, Gavin Newsom went to Germany to explain the concept of Nazis to the people of Germany. That must have been very odd for some of them. That had to be a little weird. But of course, the one who stole the show, the brightest, the boldest, the most incredible among us, was AOC, who I genuinely believe, she decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try and make as big of an ass out of myself as I possibly can and just see what happens after that. As, I've never seen someone be so wrong so often in one speech. And not like wrong as in like policy positions, although she did when she advocated for global communism. I'll show you that one. But basic geography or siding with colonizers about colonialism or not knowing where Mexicans come from. This was quite the speech for the illustrious, the incredible, the amazing AOC. We're going to get into all of that. There was one Democrat at the Munich Security Council who made some sense, and you're never going to believe who it was. Also, Stephen A. Smith, who claims he's not running for president, is definitely running for president. We're going to show you guys that clip. I think Stephen A. will do great in a Democratic primary. I got to tell you, if nothing else, the show is going to be absolutely spectacular. But before we get started, guys, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. Share the video out all over the place. Share the like button. For my local audience, for everybody watching locally on Long Island, by the way, Kathy Hochul, it is on Long Island. It is not in Long Island, you dumbass. Just so you're aware. I've got a special announcement coming out tonight at 8 p.m. Across all the platforms. Make sure you guys check that out. That'll be coming out at 8 p.m. tonight. Midterms kickoff. We are pretty much in the swing of it right now, so we're going to be having a special kickoff event. I'll let you guys know about all of that at 8 p.m. tonight, so make sure you keep it locked in here for all that good stuff. Once again, guys, hit the thumbs up button. Share the video out all over the place before we jump in. Head on over to loudmajorityusa.com. That's loudmajorityusa.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out our shop. That is the best way to support this show and everything we've got going on over here. You guys can pick up your FO hoodies. We've got them in t-shirts also, and just about every color imaginable. These things are flying off the shelves, so get it while the getting is good. If you're more of a t-shirt person like I am, not right now, we've got all the t-shirts as well. Guys, loudmajorityusa.com. Check out the 250 gear. As you see right here on the screen, we got a whole bunch of good stuff over there for the 250th anniversary of America. This one happens to be my favorite so far. If I'm being honest with you, this one is definitely my favorite. So, the Munich Security Council happened. I don't know why AOC was there in the first place. She is a middling dimwit. But more than that, she is just a run-of-the-mill congressman. I'm not really even sure why she was asked to speak on this panel. But she had some moments that will go down in Lenny Manginelli. Shout out to Lenny Manginelli, guys. Just went through a really serious surgery. One of the best guys I know. The Loud Majority wouldn't exist without that guy. Lenny, hope you're feeling well, buddy. Hope you're feeling well. I know you got a great view from your the hospital, so I hope you're feeling well, bud. I'll come see you soon. So, AOC speaks at the Munich Security Council, and she had some interesting takes. Which one should we start with? Let's start with Venezuela. You got to make sure you roll your R's. There's no R's in that word. You got to make sure you roll your letters so you get the accent proper. for AOC, but she had an interesting take on the ousting of Nicolas Maduro. You got to make sure you say it that way. I don't know why people do that. They don't have an accent, and then once they hit one thing that might be remotely Spanish, they decide to start rolling R's and shit. So AOC, she was talking about Venezuela and how she doesn't support the Maduro regime, obviously, but she also wasn't really a fan of what President Trump did. And then she gave us a bit of a geography lesson that I was unaware of.
You know, we look at what happened in Venezuela, for example. It is not a it is not a remark on who Maduro was as a leader. He canceled elections. He was an
Maduro.
Anti-democratic leader. That doesn't mean that we can kidnap a head of state and engage in acts of war just because the nation is below the equator. And
just because the nation is below the equator. Just because the nation is not below the equator, you dumbass. Although I will give the people of Munich a pass because they don't live in this hemisphere and probably don't know the nation's below the equator. Now, look, most people probably don't know where the equator goes through. Most people probably don't know that it hits a little bit of Colombia and a little bit of Ecuador, but mostly goes through Brazil. Most people probably don't know that. However, they don't base their foreign policy around geography in which they do not understand. But I guess AOC thinks that the equator runs through South Florida. So there was one that she got wrong. Okay. Now let's move on to colonialism. Colonialism, something that the Democrats have really, really hated for quite some time. The age of empire. The age of empire. The American empire. The empire that ruled the world for the last 100 years and brought incredibly great things to the majority of the world, like indoor plumbing and electricity and the internet. You know, minor technological advances. Naturally, everything else is our fault, but we'll ignore the rest of it, not to mention all the foreign aid we've sent over there. But AOC had an interesting take when it came to Greenland. She was speaking to the people of Denmark on President Trump's evil plans for taking over Greenland.
And Americans, the vast majority of Americans, are deeply opposed to this nonsense with Greenland. So this is really about him. And as democracies, we have a responsibility to hold fast to one another based on those democratic values.
Now, nobody told AOC that when she's talking about Denmark, that Denmark is currently colonizing Greenland. But she doesn't know that because neurons fire a bit slowly in her brain. Now, if you need any proof of the neurons firing at a slower rate than your average bear, well, we look no further than Taiwan. Now, I want to be clear. Should the American people, should the American government provide boots on the ground to Taiwan if China invades? The answer to that question is yes or no. I would say no. AOC took a bit of a different approach.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is of course a very long-standing policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
What? What the hell was that? I mean, I guess that's straight out of the Kamala Harris speechwriting book, where if you say enough words, eventually the person will forget what question they asked you. But I don't know. Yes, will we put troops on the ground for Taiwan if China invades? Yes or no? My answer is no. The first 30 seconds of that, I don't know what that was. But look, I've shown you her stance on colonialism. And I've shown you her intelligence when it comes to geography, or the lack thereof. I've shown you her stance on Taiwan. However, one thing I did not think I would need to explain to the proud Latina woman from Yorktown Heights, New York, that is AOC, I didn't think I would need to explain to her why they speak Spanish in Mexico. You see, Marco Rubio gave, and I'm going to show it to you guys in a second. I'm going to show you a large portion of it because it's actually incredibly good. Marco Rubio gave a speech about how what the importance is of Western civilization ruling the world. And it is, because if the West does not rule the world, then the Far East rules it, or the Mideast. And I'm not sure which one of those is more terrifying, to be totally honest with you. But Marco Rubio, when speaking on the idea of American culture, spoke about the cowboys. Oh, yeah, cowboys. We all seen Yellowstone. And if you haven't, quite frankly, I don't know what the hell you're doing. Watch Yellowstone. It's a great show. Well, AOC decided to rebut the idea that cowboys are American. She had a very interesting little notion. She had an interesting idea about, she doesn't really understand what the West and cowboys have to do with each other.
Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture. My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that.
Alex, where do you think Mexicans came from? That's why they speak Spanish in Mexico. I promised I wouldn't say it, but it's very challenging. You see, this is what happens when you conduct geopolitics as if the world began spinning the moment you popped out. Where do you think Mexicans came from? Spanish colonialism. That's why they speak Spanish in Mexico. You idiot. Sometimes I wonder if, so I do this about anti-Israel people all the time, that, I think that they have a bet with each other that they can't work Israel into, every sentence. I wonder if, AOC has, a bet with Ilhan Omar to see, okay, who's going to be the biggest dumbass of today? AOC, the illustrious, the brilliant, went on to say that it's not about a clash of cultures. No. We don't have a clash of cultures. Sure, in the Far East, we still have rampant communism in places like North Korea and China. Sure, we have Islamic theocracies that marry off 9-year-old girls in the Middle East. That they want global domination. Sure, we have that. But AOC doesn't think that is the problem. Facing the world. No. She believes that the biggest problem we have is a global class struggle. That's right. A global class struggle. So she then went to the Munich Security Council and advocated for global communism. But it took her 2 minutes to do it because she's a dumbass.
You are starting to see the ascent of the right. even in places like Munich. Marco Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture.
Yes.
My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that. But I think it's also important to note how thin that foundation is.
You're right. 500 years of the Enlightenment, completely thin.
Culture is changing. Culture always changed.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Culture for the entire history of human civilization has been a fluid, evolving thing that is a response to the conditions that we live in. And so they want to take this mantle of culture. At the end of the day, though, it is very thin. And so the response...
Yeah, you said that already.
...that we have to have is, again, it's material, it's class-based, it's common interest. There was certainly more openness to what I was saying than probably there would be in years past. We can't underestimate the appeal of going back to these well-worn grooves.
She's talking about going back to communism. A global class struggle is global communism, straight out of the writings of Marx and Engels. Time-tested, proven not to work. Moreover, the irony of her doing it in Munich, where if you go to Germany today, you can see exactly where the Berlin Wall once stood. Why? Because East Berlin still looks like shit, and West Berlin looks nice and modern. They're still building it back. After 45 years of being under communist rule, Eastern Germany is not as nice as Western Germany. This is not a shocking thing. You can see it in the room, but AOC doesn't know that. AOC doesn't know that the country in which she's currently sitting in may have some experience with the subject matter for which she speaks. But, somehow, everything I just showed you was not the most out of touch, was not the worst try and read the room moment of the Munich Security Council, because that moment came from the snake oil salesman himself, Gavin Newsom, who decided to go to Germany to lecture them about fascism and the Gestapo.
But I want to remember all those images of masked men, the secret police, something familiar in Germany. Those first images came out of my state, the second largest city in the United States of America. We saw 4,000 National Guard federalized. First time, we'd never seen anything like this. And 700 active duty Marines sent not overseas, but to the second largest city in the United States of America, militarizing the streets of my city. Masked men showing up, unaccountable, no IDs.
Bro, Gavin, there are people in that room who might have parents or grandparents that, might know a little bit more than you about this idea of Gestapo, considering, some of them may have been. I don't know, maybe going to Germany and preaching about the fears of Nazism, particularly your invented fears of Nazism, is probably not the best idea in the world, completely out of touch. Has no idea. Like it's like these people are so stuck in their talking points that they can't read the room. Do you realize that if there's someone in that room who's over the age of 80, they were alive for the moment in which you're pretending is currently happening in America? Something we've never seen before in California, except in the riots in 92. Something we've never seen before. Except in Little Rock in the 50s. Something we've never seen before. We've seen it plenty of times, Gavin. You're just an idiot. You're dumb. And completely out of touch with the world in which you are currently living in. But he will do anything. He will say anything to continue to gain power in this country. Even if he has to go over to a foreign nation and bitch and moan about how bad things are here in America. Now, there was one Democrat at the Munich Security Council who made a lot of sense. And I got to tell you, saying this out loud does not bring me any great joy. That one, you know what, chat? Let's have some fun here. Chat, let's have ourselves a little bit of fun here. Who do you think is the Democrat that went over to the Munich Security Council and made the most sense? Let's pop the live chat up on the screen and see if you guys can come up with who it was. Before we do that, guys, head on over to lfatv.us. That's lfatv.us. That is your home base, your mothership, your landing pad for all things LFA-TV related. Check out the LFA TV store. And while you guys are there, consider becoming a monthly donor over at LFA TV. That's how we keep the lights on over here. It's how we keep Kevin fat. Now apparently, Leighton Anderson in the Facebook chat. You are such a gross, fat little troll. Okay, I'll live. By the way, I'm not little. Chat, who do you think is the? We got Fetterman. Okay, we got some Fetterman. We got some growing John Fetterman fans in the chat here. Oh, some of you know. Some of you are aware. That is right. The only Democrat to go to the Munich Security Council and make any sense at all is Hillary Clinton.
I think we need to call it for what it is.
Secretary
There
Clinton.
is a legitimate reason to have a debate about things like migration. It went too far. It's been disruptive and destabilizing, and it needs to be fixed in a humane way with secure borders that don't torture and kill people.
Who was that? Who was that woman taking the aggressively moderate position on immigration from the Democratic perspective? I don't know who that was. Also, I got to know, why was Hillary Clinton speaking at the Munich Security Council? Why was Hillary Clinton speaking at the Munich Security Council about the dangers of migration at a time when the United States' number one issue is immigration? Are you listening? Please, let her run again. God, please, let Hillary Clinton run in 2028. Please, I'm begging you, let her run. I need that more than anything. I need that more than anything I can describe. I need Hillary Clinton to run in 2028. Is she dipping her toe back in the water? Chat, what do you think? Chat, what do you think? Is Hillary dipping her toe back in the election waters? Is that what you think? Is she out there, just maybe she's not dancing on the dance floor yet, but she's kind of lingering around the outside, seeing what the party's like, seeing what everybody's feeling. I need Hillary Clinton to run for president again. I need that more than I can possibly describe. What do you guys think? You think she's running? I think she is. I think she's dipping her toe. I mean, because there's a level of arrogance out there that I would put on the Clintons to say that they think they probably can run again. They think that they can run again. And I think she's just arrogant enough to do it. Now, everyone at the Munich Security Council wasn't batshit crazy or geographically illiterate or explaining Nazis to Germans. That's just a mind-blowing, like, it's like if you hit a shark with a boomstick. I don't even know what to even do with that. Not everyone. Some people gave inspiring speeches about the importance of culture, about the importance of Western dominance. And I got to tell you, Marco Rubio, who, there's a lot of people out there. Is it going to be Vance? Is it going to be Rubio? The pick in 2028, the base seems to be kind of divided on that. Which one is it going to be? I have no issue saying I am firmly in the J.D. Vance category. I would have no issue with Marco Rubio being vice president, but I am firmly in the Vance category until someone convinces me otherwise. Gave an incredible speech, and I'm going to play you guys a part of it. Uplifting. Talking about the importance that the West continue to rule the world. Here was Secretary of State Rubio.
For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together. What we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable, because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond.
Now, why is that so important? I talk about foreign policy on the, well, I talk about foreign nations, particularly Western nations, on this show a lot, because guess what? When Germany is strong on its own, we don't have to be strong for them. If Ukraine was strong on its own, we wouldn't have to pay for their defense. And that goes for many of the other Western European nations who are plagued by liberal guilt of the sins of the past, who think that it is their responsibility to take in the totality of the world's poor, who are watching their cultures, their distinctly good cultures, be rooted out for some fake virtue of multiculturalism. No, Germany is Germany. France is France. The UK is the UK. And America is America. We do not need to be one global hegemony where everyone looks exactly the same and acts exactly the same, because it will be the white liberal guilt that leads to the downfall of the West. It will be white liberal women in nations all over all over the West, who never have to live with the policies in which they advocate for, the awfuls, as I call them on this show, that will lead to the downfall of the transatlantic alliance that has taken root over the last 100 years. If you think I'm being dramatic, I'm not. There are enclaves in many of these European nations that do not look like the country in which they currently reside. And it's not about, and when I say look like, I don't mean what a person physically looks like. I mean the nation in which it represents. Whether it's Rotherham in the UK, or it's certain neighborhoods in Paris, or it's German towns like Kassel, which were told years ago that thousands of asylum seekers were going to be coming to their town, and there was nothing the people of the town could do about it. And if they didn't like it, they were free to leave Germany, their homes, because mass migration, mass unassimilation will be the downfall of Western civilization, will be the downfall of the Western cultures, will be the downfall of the Judeo-Christian ethic that so many of our countries have put forth. And finally, we have people who are willing to say it out loud. 10 years ago, if you said this, you were labeled an xenophobe. You're xenophobic. No, I just like where I live. And it is not my responsibility to right the ills of the last 1,000 years. And some people will have a problem with that. And this is the face of a guy who doesn't care. Who doesn't care at all, because mass migration is a very serious problem. And guess what? Everything that happens in Europe happens in America 5 years later. I say it all the time, that when Europe sneezes, America catches a cold. The Islamification of Western Europe is no different than the gang-ridden cities in which we see coming from Latin America. Go look at the grooming gang scandal in the UK. Go look at the assaults that went on in Cologne, Germany. Go read Douglas Murray's book, The Strange Death of Europe. The stuff is coming here, everybody. You need any more proof of that? Look at the midterms this year. And not on a congressional level, on a local level, particularly here in New York. Look at how many people are running for office who weren't born here. Some people will think that's okay, but it's not. It just isn't. And Marco Rubio says it straight. Mass migration is a problem.
Mass migration is not, was not, isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West.
I mean, not for nothing, but Marco Rubio and Hillary Clinton both use the same phraseology. Destabilizing. It's nice to finally have an administration and also a sort of weird neoliberal side that understands that this is a serious problem. Barack Obama understood it. The only difference was he got the cooperation of many Western leaders, many American leaders, in order to preserve what little bit of the American culture is left. Yet you have idiots out there like AOC who think that cowboys aren't Americans because Mexicans also were cowboys, but doesn't know that Mexicans came from Spain. I'm not saying that the West ruling the world is the best possible solution. I'm saying it's the best worst solution. Because you have three options. You can either be ruled by the communism of the Far East, the Islamic theocracies of the Middle East, or the West. There are no other options. So which one are you taking? Which one are you taking? Because I'll take the West every single day. And twice on Sunday. Guys, we'll be back in 1 second because there is more news that I got to get to about rational Democrats poking their head out there. One of them says they're not running for president, but very clearly is. Before we get to that, here's Jeremy.
Hey, everybody. If you're not familiar with, then let me introduce to you Armor Colostrum. Now, I didn't know what colostrum was up until a few years ago. I'd never even really heard of it. And then my wife turned me on to Armor Colostrum. And what colostrum does is it helps regrow your hair. Not going to lie, that's the reason that I started looking into it. But then I started noticing some other things that I could benefit from. I used to get acid reflux very badly. I used to bloat very badly. It felt like I was 10 or 15 pounds heavier than I was until I made Armor Colostrum a part of my everyday schedule. And now things have changed so very much. Let me introduce to you what Armor Colostrum actually does and what it looks like. In a study measuring immune cell response to toxin, Armor Colostrum performed 32% stronger and faster than other colostrum companies. 400 plus bionutrients activated in your life, in your body to help regrow hair, strengthen your gut health, regrow your nails, toenails, and fingernails healthy, get rid of fungus, stop bloating, and more. And now you can get yours right now for up to $18 off each and every purchase at tryarmor.com. Promo code LFATV. Click the apply button once you've entered the code and watch your discount fall off. That is tryarmor.com/LFATV. Order now.
Guys, head on over to tryarmor.com/LFATV. That's tryarmor.com/LFATV. So while the most radical of the Democratic Party, for some reason, gets a platform on the Gavin Newsom, I can understand. Even Hillary Clinton, I can understand. Former Secretary of State, former First Lady. Gavin Newsom controls one of the biggest ports in the world, the Port of Long Beach. I can understand why they were there if they were going to speak on a global stage. I don't know why AOC is there. She represents 17,000 people in northern Queens. But polls continue to show that the Democratic Party is moving further and further to the left, moving way too far to the left. That's not me saying that. That's CNN.
Democrats who think of themselves as democratic socialists, among all Democrats, including those independents who lean towards the Democratic Party. Look at this. We're talking about a third of all Democrats who identify as democratic socialists. Bernie Sanders and Zohran Mamdani are not alone. They are a considerable part of the Democratic base at this point. And more than that, if you look at Democrats under the age of 35, they are nearly half of the Democratic Party. Look at this. 42% of Democrats think of themselves as democratic socialists under the age of 35, just like Zohran Mamdani. What happened in New York City is not some aberration, right? It is not something that just happened in New York City. It is something that we are seeing grow within the Democratic Party at this particular point when we're talking about 42% of Democrats under the age of 35 identifying as Democratic Socialists and a third of all Democrats. My goodness gracious.
So if the ideology of the Democratic Party is shifting or changing, how are people feeling about it?
Okay, so we're talking about the Democratic base, right? But what about all Americans, right? How about all voters? Voters who say the Democrats are now too liberal. Look at this percentage. It was 42% in 96, 48% in 2013, now 58% in 2025 of all voters say that the Democratic Party is too liberal. The Democrats are moving to the left, the far left is gaining power, and there could be some electoral rip.
I want to be clear about how important that last number is. Obviously, the fact that nearly half of Democrats under the age of 35 consider themselves communists, they can call themselves democratic socialists all they want. It's communism by a different name. But it's the last part that I find even more troubling. Because, as Harry Anton pointed out, in 2013, 48% of Americans thought the Democrats were too liberal. And that led to the Tea Party wave. The Tea Party wave of, yes, some neocons, but some Republicans that actually wanted to make a difference. Not Kevin McCarthy. We'll leave that there. Republicans, establishment Republicans, are out there fighting the Democratic Party, and they don't even realize the enemy that is actually in their face. The DSA is who they need to be battling, not your run-of-the-mill Bill Clinton boring-ass Democrat. You just saw Hillary Clinton say that mass migration is a serious problem, all while the DSA is out there advocating for open borders. And the momentum behind the Democratic Party is all with the DSA. It is not with the neoliberals. It is not with the James Carvilles of the world. It is not with the Hillary Clintons, and it is not with the Obamas or the Cuomos. It is with a new brand of Democrat, a dangerous kind of Democrat, a Zoran Mamdani type of Democrat. And this Republican Party has got their heads so far up their asses that these midterms are going to be a disaster. They're going to be a disaster unless we, as a Republican Party, begin to swing first. We must enter the fight before being punched in the face. They need to get this. They need to listen to the people who are out there on the ground. If not, we are in for a disaster. I'm not talking about just the toss-up seats. I'm talking about the lean red seats. They need to engage with the activist base. They need to highlight Democrats that aren't batshit crazy. There's one girl who's a bartender at our local... Here we go. Does this sound familiar at all? Does this sound familiar at all? There's one girl running for a seat here on Long Island, works at a local bar that I go to all the time, who is fully endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, and thinks we need to take all the money from ICE and give it towards the teachers union. Long Island has some of the best funded schools anywhere in America. And she says it's not enough. Funnel more money to the teachers union so that they can gain even more power. The teachers union, of course, one of the most communist, democratic, socialist entities anywhere in the world. And she's not going to win because she's running in a seat that's like an R plus 15. But these are the candidates we have to worry about, because those are the candidates that are going to end up pulling up the bottom of the ticket in your state assemblies, in your state senates, and in your city councils. Once again, guys, we're going to be having our midterm kickoff party next week. Stay tuned for that announcement tonight at 8 p.m. I'll give you guys all the details on that one. But look, you can, I saw this on Instagram today, that you can either be a resident of America or you can be a citizen of America. A resident just goes to school and goes to work and gets all the the benefits of being an American, or you can be an active citizen. You can give up your time. You can give up your money. You can give up the things you need to give up in order to make the changes in which you want to see. You got to go to those boring-ass school board meetings that take 9 hours for them to decide whether or not they're going to spend $20 million on a roof. Those are where the decisions get made. If you're not actively involved, if you're not doing that, if you're not building movements in your particular area, then when we get smacked, we can only blame ourselves. We've got 9 months till Election Day. If you're not going to start today, then when will you? That's my question. Once again, we'll be having our kickoff party for the midterms. I'll be making the announcement tonight, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Some Democrats out there are actually making a little bit of sense. I just don't think they're going to be able to find a place in today's Democratic Party. We'll get to that in 1 second. Before we do that, Mike Lindell.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 six-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed, because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Guys, head on over to MyPillow.com and use promo code LOUD. That's MyPillow.com, promo code LOUD, for up to 80% off everything on the website. That's MyPillow.com, promo code LOUD. So there are some Democrats. There are some Democrats out there making a little bit of sense. Now, the problem is that the ones that tend to get all the spotlight are the batshit crazy ones who make us all look like idiots on the world stage. One of them, who has claimed he's not running for president, even though everyone knows that he probably is or probably should, or if he doesn't, will kick himself in the ass later in life for not doing it, is Stephen A. Smith. Now, I'm going to show you a clip of Stephen A., and sometimes he can be a giant pain in the ass. He's a Democrat, but sometimes he can be completely rational. And I wonder if there is any space in the Democratic Party for a normal, rational human being today, or if the Democratic Party can only be occupied today by California governors who go to Germany to explain to them the concept of Nazis, or idiots from Yorktown Heights who don't know where the equator is. Is there room for Stephen A. Smith in today's Democratic Party? I don't know.
Make no mistake about it. We wouldn't have a border crisis under my watch. Hell no. We wouldn't have this crime that exists in the streets of New York. You wouldn't hear about me saying defund the police. We ain't defunding any police. I'm calling 911 when there's a problem. I know you're calling 911 when there's a problem. I'll be damned if I'm going to have less police officers out there. There's going to be more. That's me. I would focus on a flourishing economy and making sure we did everything we could, because I believe when you have something to lose, you know how to behave. When you have something to lose, you know how to behave. If you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. And as a result, you're willing to tear down anything, even if it's America, because you feel betrayed by a country that's supposed to be looking out for you and positioning you to thrive instead of wallow in misery and suffering. So, of course, I would pay attention to the economy. I would pay attention to all of those things.
Now, it's the last part of that I want to focus on, because Stephen A. is so correct. If you don't feel invested in a system, then you don't care if that system gets torn down. That's why we're seeing people out in the streets. Look, in the 1950s, which some of you were around for, in the 1960s, you had one person working in a factory. He came home to a big house, a wife, and children. He could take vacations. he could see the fruits of his labor. Now you have people mired in student loan debt with a degree they can't use for a job that no longer exists. You got 2 people working in each household with 1 child as opposed to 4, 5, 6, 7 like there were in the past in a tiny ass house where they're paying exorbitant mortgage rates for. Why would those people feel invested in the current system? Why would they? Because look, this is the single greatest system that has ever existed. If young people today, and look, whatever you think, it doesn't matter what you think. It matters what the people out there feel. Because if they feel like nothing is going to happen, if they feel like there's no future for them, if they feel like their life is going to be more complicated and more difficult than their parents, then they are not going to care when people like Zoran Mamdani come in and say that we're going to burn the whole damn thing down. When you have young people out there in the streets who think they are saving America from a revolution because they are being lied to by their leaders. They're being lied to by social media. They're not being educated correctly by their teachers. You get really sad scenes like this one. So there was a video out of Washington where teachers were advocating for their high school students to go and protest against ICE, which is a batshit notion, if you ask me. We used to call that cutting school. There's some people watching this right now who knew me in high school who know damn well that I would have certainly loved to be able to use the excuse for cutting school that I was standing up for some political position that I don't truly understand. But there are young people today, as we've shown you the clip after the clip after the clip after the clip, of teachers telling their students that the Gestapo is out in the streets, that Hitler is around every corner and everyone with a red hat is a Nazi. So what happens? So you get high school students out in the street protesting against federal law enforcement. And when one of them steps out of line, you get this. Now look, perhaps if that kid had been in school, they would have learned about consequences. But when you're cosplaying, it is a lot different. When you're 35 years old and a vegan and you got weak ankles, and you're cosplaying as a revolutionary. But now you've lumped high school kids who don't know what's happening because your average high school student is about as intelligent as your average bear. I don't care how smart your high school student is. All teenagers are morons. I know. I used to be one. Who confronts cops, doesn't follow instructions, then when they get arrested, they're quite literally screaming for their mommy. Now, do I want that 15, 16, 17-year-old kid out there getting arrested? No. But you know what I want even less than that? I want the teachers who are advocating for their students to go out and do these things to be fired immediately. But we have dithering idiots running for Congress here on Long Island who thinks that we should fund more of that. Because guess what, Democrats, if you are using, and that's what they're doing, if you are using children for all intents and purposes as cannon fodder because they're 16 years old and they're useful idiots, then you are the most despicable human beings on planet Earth. And that's exactly what they're doing. We saw videos coming out of the Minneapolis protests of pregnant women being shot with pepper balls. Now, I don't want to see pregnant women shot with pepper balls. You know what else but you know what stops that from happening? Don't go to protests if you're 35 weeks pregnant. That's the footage that these idiots want to see. That's the footage that the leaders of these movements, the leaders of the DSA, want to get. If you're a teacher and you're telling your students to go out and protest federal law enforcement, you need to lose your job. But you never will. Why? Because it's almost impossible to fire a bad teacher, particularly here in the state of New York. And why? It costs nearly $3 million to fire bad teachers. And I think we can all agree that if you're out there and you're advocating for your students on class time to go out and protest federal law enforcement instead of, teaching them how to read, you're a bad teacher. Now, I had some of the greatest teachers in the world, and the good ones ought to be protected. 1,000%. But these activist teachers someone is letting these kids out of school. I know, because every time I tried to sneak out of school, there was somebody there attempting to stop me. Easy high school would have been if I would have just said that I was advocating for some kind of bullshit political position so I couldn't go to chemistry. How much easier would your life have been in high school if you could just cut school and pretend you were standing up for the moral fabric of the society? I would have loved to have gotten away with that crap. But I didn't. You know why? Because I had good teachers. Not activists who wanted the summers off. And that's what the majority of these teachers are now. They're just political activists who want the summer off. Guys, it's 4 p.m. I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in. Once again, guys, big announcement coming tonight at 8 p.m. across all of my platforms. Make sure you guys keep it locked into all of them. If you're for all the... This is a big announcement just for Long Island. Sorry, I wish I had a bigger national announcement, but this is just for the locals out here on the island. That'll be coming at 8 p.m. tonight. Stay tuned for that. I will catch you guys all back live tomorrow. Today's show went pretty hard. Today's show went pretty damn hard. Everybody take a breather. Stay striding, everybody. Stay loud.